Okay.
I'd love that.
I'm
Yeah.
a submissive in a DS relationship, and I'm also polyamorous. My
Okay.
dominant is poly as well, but is jealous and territorial. Is
Mm.
anyone else both DS and poly? And how does that work for you?
Yes, I am both DS and poly. I have multiple relationships in which I am the dominant. One of my partners and I have a 24/7 TPE. Now she's not living, it's a long distance, but it's like she literally wakes up every morning, gives me a wake up call, and has to report clothing and checks in with me throughout the day. And she has multiple partners, and she has another partner that is also a dominant. So yes, it does work. It can work. So a couple things, and this is going to sound like a broken record, but I found that a lot of these questions can be answered this way. Uh, Communicate.
What?
It,
What?
right? I know. Go figure. Straightforward, honest, and open communication. You really have to talk about things. The bigger issue I hear this person having, rather than being a sub who's in a DS relationship with a dominant and being polyamorous, none of those things are necessarily a problem. The problem is the fact that your dominant is jealous and territorial. That's going to become an issue because there's no way
Mhm.
that you can fix that. They're going to have to work on them.
Agreed.
There is no amount of you doing, X, Y, Z plus one, two, and three, and somehow making their insecurity go away. This never happens, regardless of whether or not it's a DS, regardless of whether or not they're a Dom. People's insecurities are their insecurities, and they have to work on them. If they are jealous, it's a feeling that they have, and that you cannot fix. Trust
Mhm.
me, I have tried to appease someone else who is jealous. It never ever works because they just find other reasons to be uncomfortable. And ultimately, it becomes a form of abuse where they're trying to force you to make them more comfortable rather than deal with the fact that they're the one that has an underlying insecurity. And in many cases, if they're jealous to the point where you're calling them jealous, territorial, and things like that, it is probably already pathological. It is a problem that they need to work with. I'm not saying it cannot work because it absolutely can. I do it, but the insecurities need to be worked on by that person, and no one else can fix them.
I agree. Um,
This is why
Also,
you're brilliant,
hashtag,
because that's always your first statement. I agree with Zach. There you go. New way of
um,
living life.
hashtag said, I'd like to add a crucial facet of communication is expectation management, which that's pretty freaking important. Expectation management. And we should probably talk about that a little bit before I go into my answer.
Go for it.
So, expectation management. To me, that simply means that a human needs to be self aware enough, needs to take the time to learn what are the covert contracts that they have a tendency to build into their lives. Like, if I'm having sex with this person, then we're starting a long term relationship. Or if this person says they love me, then we are on the relationship escalator towards marriage, or so on and so forth. What are the assumptions that you have a tendency to make, and then start explicitly negotiating and talking about those? Because the from my perspective, the only way to actually manage expectations is to talk about them, because otherwise in
Communication?
the back of your head, yes,
The C
communication,
word?
because otherwise
No.
in the back of your head they can still sneak up and say, well, it's got to be like this. I mean, who wouldn't think this if, this thing is happening? They said they love me. That must mean that they want to be with me forever. And for some people, loving somebody doesn't mean that they want to be with them forever. It simply means that they love them, right? They're affectionate and feel good towards them, but they got other shit to do, right? Like, so loving them doesn't necessarily mean a relationship to them. These are things that are important to address. Zach, do you have anything to go on the expectation management?
Absolutely. One of the things I was going to say, and I actually wrote it down so I didn't forget it, is I learned this years ago. There are two reasons, and actually it's more like 1.5, but there are two reasons that any relationship ever ends. And I mean any relationship, whether it be employer, employee, romantic, friendship, any relationship between two entities only ever ends for one of two reasons, and sometimes both. It is either a lack of communication or unrealistic expectations. And quite frankly, you can deal with unrealistic expectations by properly communicating them.
I'd
Okay,
add a
if you
third:
ever think, oh, go for
death.
it, shoot. I mean, no,
Okay,
no,
okay. Done with the morbidity.
that could actually fall under unrealistic expectations. The expectation that that relationship is going to continue past death is unrealistic. Haha.
Got it. Yes,
There you go.
I
Yeah.
love the way you play skip jump with the logic.
Eh, eh, that's just it's those these are facts. The expectation that a relationship is going to continue after death is unrealistic, right? We could talk about that later. We can go into so much deep philosophy. Don't even get me going
Sure,
there. But yeah,
sure.
so no, that I mean, so between viable entities, there's only those two reasons, and really it's just one that you've got to communicate. If you are having unrealistic expectations and they're not being properly communicated, that's a problem. And so if
Mhm.
someone has the expectation that you are going to somehow do the right things to help them deal with their insecurity, that is unrealistic. Because ultimately, you are the one that has insecurity. I always try to tell people who are feeling jealousy, you need to be aware of the fact that you are the only person that is having that feeling in this interaction, and you have to deal with it. It is not fair to make somebody else somehow have to jump through hoops to manage something that you're feeling and aren't dealing with. That is just an unrealistic expectation. So that's where I come with that.
I agree.
There you go again. See, this is why you're so darn smart.
See, I'm
Boy,
just
I
gonna
tell you.
say that and just watch him. Like
Uh,
as soon as he realizes it, his eyes go woo. Okay, so back to the
oh man.
original topic of power exchange and polyamory. So my response is I am a dominant. I am also what I would consider territorial. I call it possessive. This is mine. Um, I'm also polyamorous and monoromantic, which means that while I have deep, intimate feelings of love for multiple people, I really only get that Twitter pated sort of romantic feeling for one person at a time thus far in my life, no matter how many people I might love and date at any given time. So that said, my submissive is also polyamorous, and I want him to be able to live the life he needs to live in order to be fulfilled and happy. And to be clear, this is part of my possessiveness. It's important to me to enable his feelings of happiness and joy.
Mhm.
Um, and so I have this hierarchy of needs that I talk about when it comes to DS. And for me, my needs are my priorities are my needs, my submissive needs, my wants, my submissive's wants. It's that simple. My needs will always come first. I believe every human, their needs must come first. It's that simple. Because I'm the dominant, my submissive's needs come next, but then my wants come before their needs.
Mhm.
Or before their, not my wants. My wants come before their wants, but their needs always come before my wants. So my desire to do some silly thing right now is always going to becoming behind their need for
Mhm.
something in our relationship.
Mhm.
This is important to the relationship. So my need is to have a solid relationship with my submissive and to feel that ownership, that possessiveness. My
Mhm.
son's needs are to enjoy different experiences and people. And I have this need as well, so I totally understand it. So the goal for us is to negotiate from there, right? How do we make
Mhm.
sure that both of us are fulfilled, that our power exchange relationship is strong and loving?
Mhm.
And the way we did that is he suggested some rules. Now I know I'm going to touch on the word rules. Um, for a lot of people, rules in polyamory is not cool. You can state boundaries, but rules are not cool. I disagree. I think do it the way that you want to do it, right? If it doesn't work out, if you're like, well, they broke a rule, then you need to renegotiate. Maybe rules aren't going to work for you, but for some people it does. So what he did is he came up with rules for himself and
Mm-hmm.
his relationships that he wanted, and we discussed it. There was a lot of like discussion going on because they seemed really strict to me, but I agreed because he convinced me that this is what would be right for him, and I didn't want resentment or anything building up.
Mm-hmm.
But those rules fully support our power exchange
Mm-hmm.
and our love. So I fully see him as mine, and I'm proud when others enjoy and desire him, because ultimately he belongs to me. I own him. Like, and I use the analogies of an awesome sports car that I let
Mm-hmm.
others drive for the joy of it, or this amazing dog that I let others pet. Right? It
Yeah.
brings joy to other people to engage with what I own. But my ownership is not because of a piece of paper, but through love and years of building our bond. And he always returns to me because I've captured like his heart and his soul, no matter what fun he might have with others. Like somebody, obviously, I have a lot to say on this. Like somebody who walks my dog or keeps my dog overnight.
Mm-hmm.
My dog isn't happy to return to me because I own him like property, but because he loves me, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we're great together.
Mm-hmm.
And the key to me is, and this kind of touches on the jealousy bit, because I understand jealousy. I don't. I've felt jealousy more than once. I mean, it's. Um, but for me, if that ever changed, if his desire to come back to me every single time ever changed,
Mm-hmm.
if I were not 100% the best choice for him ever, always, I wouldn't want to be in the relationship that we have, because that to me is the foundation of what we have. Um, so to talk about jealousy, so jealousy is to me a warning device.
Mm-hmm.
It often, let me say, often points to needs in a relationship that you're instinctually thinking are not being met. It doesn't mean that they're not being met or even that they should be met. It means that somewhere in your brain, expectations are not being fulfilled. It's an internal signal of fear
Mm-hmm.
and should be acknowledged and honored, but it's not necessarily, as Zach, you said, it's not necessarily somebody else's responsibility to fix it.
Right. Yeah.
And the best way to get over jealousy is to deal with jealousy. It's like a muscle that needs to be worked. If it's weak,
Yeah.
you're going to have a hard time handling the load. But avoiding it or asking somebody else to like make things different so you're more comfortable doesn't make that muscle stronger. It weakens it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Jealousy is only overcome when fears are faced and there is consistent love, a strong relationship, communication, returning to one another. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's how you build the muscles. That's how you lift the weights, is you experience it and
Mm-hmm.
it hurts, because when you build muscle, it fucking hurts. Like, and you do 50 squats in a day. The next day you're like having to put your hand on the toilet when you sit down so you don't fall and break that shit, right? Like it hurts to build muscle. It hurts to get stronger at something.
I see you speak from experience. Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one thing I neglected to say: jealousy doesn't make somebody a bad person. It's again, it
No.
is a human emotion. It is a feeling. So this person who is saying that their dom is jealous and territorial, they're not a bad person. I'm not saying that. But like any other feeling, if I see something that makes me angry, I have to deal with the anger. I don't go over to them and tell them, you're doing something that makes me angry. You need to stop so I don't feel angry. One, you give that whatever it is that's causing that feeling way too much power, and ultimately you're
Mhm.
the only one that feels it. So I always tell people all the time, when you are feeling jealousy, because your partner is doing something over there, you need to be aware of the fact that you're the only one feeling that. So you can't go over there and expect them to do something to fix your feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
it is a human emotion, it's a feeling. And as someone who is a counselor and a student of human behavior, I firmly believe all feelings are valid. They really are. There is something that's making you feel that. And it's valid if for
Yeah.
no other reason than the fact that you feel it. But if it is going to cause strain and difficulty in your relationships, you need to be aware of and cognizant of the fact that I'm feeling jealousy. Usually, jealousy is a result of some sort of underlying fear or insecurity, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what needs to be addressed. Where does it come from? Address it. Where I think we get into trouble, particularly in our society now, is there are people that think that jealousy is somehow a sign of nobility. If you're jealous, it's because you're protective or possessive. And I don't understand how possessiveness over another human being is so vaulted and whatnot. Now, like Nookie, I'm also a Dom. I can be possessive. My partner that I live in a TPE with, she'll tell you she is a slave. Now, it took me a long time in our relationship to get to the point of thinking of her that way, but it's because that is what she is, and that's how she sees herself. She sees herself as a slave. She sees herself as property and whatnot. And she will speak about herself in the third person as my property. She's got a number. I mean, but all this is because we've had long conversations about what are we comfortable with and what do we want in this relationship. And when it came time that she was interested in another partner who is also a Dom, we had to have sit down and have a conversation. One of the things we do a lot is we have meetings where we negotiate us
Mm-hmm.
and talk about these things. And like Nookie is saying with Pet, where he wrote down his sort of rules and whatnot, and those were agreed upon. We kind of do the same thing. I actually keep a Google file about us. We have meetings. She keeps the minutes. We keep a record of that and whatnot. And the things that we agree upon are there. She's marked. She
Mm-hmm.
wears a collar. She will only ever wear my collar. Okay, no one else is ever going to collar her. Things like that. I mean, but these are things that we've agreed upon via having those negotiations and those conversations. And so yeah, I'm also possessive because she is a piece of property, and there are times that I make decisions and she defers, because we have agreed that that's what she's going to do. I don't know if you saw it, Nikki. Hashtag asked a question about
Mm-hmm.
the difference between needs and wants, and so I wanted to give you a chance to go back and look at that
Yeah,
real
I
quick.
think
Oh, we lost Nookie, and now she's back. Good. I was going to say I'm going to have this thing going all by myself, but she pulled a little disappearing act
I
on me.
think
So
that
anyway,
that is actually a question that we can touch on a little bit here. I think we should actually pull that around as another full discussion for hashtag, because I've written about the differences between wants and needs, and there's a lot to talk about and to say on that subject. So
true. You're right.
real quick, though, here's what I would say. Actually, I'm going to tell a quick little story. So, Amory, who hosts our Life in Submission, had posted something up on one of the Facebook poly groups about, wants and needs and so on and so forth. And somebody got on there and literally, and I was just like gobsmacked, literally got on there and said, well, all you really need is air, water, and food. Everything else is the want. And I was just like, oh, what? Like, ever heard of failure to thrive? Ever heard of touch starve? Like, no. Like, that didn't even take into account Maslow's hierarchy. So there's.
I was about to say somebody never heard of Maslow.
Anyway, so one of the challenges of determining wants and needs is that if a want goes unmet or ignored for too long, it actually can build to the point of pressure so that it outweighs some of your needs.
Hmm.
And that makes it really hard to determine until you actually get to the point of maybe doing some of what Zach and I have been talking about, putting together a class on, and that is like radical self care, right? Radical self care allows you to kind of reset yourself and get down to what are my wants, what are my needs, and then planning to get those fulfilled either through yourself or with interactions with others. Um,
All right, Nick, don't give away too much of my workshop. Now, I actually do radical self care. I do radical self care consulting, so don't
no, no,
don't
not
take
going
away
to
my
give away too
clientele.
much. Um, that said, needs are things that generally are going to be consistent. You're going to see consistent um, needs throughout all of your relationships. Like my need, PDA. I am super affectionate. Like I need to be able to reach out and touch what is mine. Now, I don't need to do it right this moment. That's a want. But I do need to be able to do it most of the time because that is one of the ways that I make my connections with other humans. Um, so, yeah, it's really, really interesting to go through and divide those up. And I think that that's definitely something we need to like really give a good 20 minutes to. Zach, do you want to say anything specifically about that?
No, no, I agree with you. We should probably leave that out as a good 20 minute. Let's have, because there are a bunch of things, particularly with DS, that go into that. And I like the
Yeah.
way that you kind of mentioned that, there are your needs, his needs, your wants, and his wants. And so, yeah, I would save that for a longer conversation.
Okay, so hashtag your question is actually going to be one of the kinky questions of the week coming up here pretty soon. So watch for that to be posted because people will from all over the internet will gather all the links together and you'll be able to see what people said, pretty much everywhere. And then Zach and I will tackle it in another one of these little thingy bobbers. So
Yeah,
yay.
definitely.